Hello and welcome to the Taster, and today I'm going to be looking at something completely different. So far we've looked at wines, we've looked at teas and coffees. Well, today we're going to be having a look at beer for the first time, and in particular I'm going to be looking at English ales. Now the most popular type of beer I think that's sold in the pubs, certainly in England, would seem to be lager, so I'm not looking at that today, although maybe sometime in the future. Today I'm looking at more sort of traditional English ales. Now, purists would say that the only way to drink an English ale is in a pub, from a big cask drawn from one of those big pulley tap things into a big pint glass. And what I've got here is maybe a little bit of a second best in that regard, because what I've got here are bottles. However, there's something slightly unusual, I guess, about these bottles. Nowadays what they've started doing is to add a little bit of yeast into the bottle, so what you're getting is a more live kind of product, and it's closer to what you get in the pub. So it's pretty good. It may be a second best, but it's a pretty good second best. So what I've done today is I've got a couple of beers. I've taken two different breweries basically, and I've taken a London brewery and a Yorkshire brewery. So we've got the north-south divide going on there. These are two of the most famous and best breweries and oldest breweries in the country. And so what I'm talking about here is Fuller's of London, Chiswick specifically, if you know your London. And from Fuller's I've got their very most famous beer of all, which is a London Pride. I think this is actually the best-selling premium cask beer in the country. And I've got another example of their product, which is a Bengal Lancer. Now, it's called Bengal Lancer because it's an IPA. An IPA stands for India Pale Ale, so Bengal, India, there's your connection. Then Samuel Smith, which is a Yorkshire brewery based in Tadcaster. And what I've gone for from them is a couple of darker kind of beers. I've gone for the famous Taddy Porter. Taddy, I believe, would be because it's based in Tadcaster, hence Taddy. And the Nut Brown Ale. So I'm going to have a taste of all these, and I'll see what I think. So we'll start off with the London Pride. This is probably the most popular kind of ale style in the country. It's a bitter, a best bitter, or a pale ale. Now, not to confuse a pale ale with an India pale ale. So I'll pour that out and let's have a look. Just trying to pour it down the side so it doesn't froth up too much, although it should still give me a bit of a head there. Okay, and I'll put that in front there. And actually what I'll do is I'll pour all of them out so we can compare the colours to begin with. So here's the Bengal Lancer. IPAs, India Pale Ale, were originally brewed for taking on long journeys, taking across to long journeys. So for that reason, they tend to be slightly more alcoholic and slightly hoppier than the average bitter. The hops are one of the things that they do. A couple of things that they do. First of all, they give it some flavour to the beer, and another thing they do is to act as a sort of preservative. So by adding some extra hops to these beers, they were able to survive the long ship journeys that much better. Okay, and the Taddy Porter. Give that a whirl. That's enough. And maybe a bit more. There we go. And finally the Nut Brown Ale. So let's have a look at that. Quite a difference in the colours, I think you'll see already. And there we go. Leave that one. Yeah, and there's a real contrast in the different colours we've got here. The palest, as you might expect from the name, is the India Pale Ale, the IPA here, Bengal Lancer. which is sort of ambery, coppery kind of a colour. And then we've got the London Pride, which is slightly darker. I'm not sure if that comes across that much on the camera, but the one on my left, your right, is slightly darker. Again, a kind of amber, a slightly deeper hue. Then the Taddy Porter here, I mean, it's pretty much black and opaque from here. You know, I'm just holding it to the light, and it's kind of maybe a little bit more of a cola kind of colour. I can see a sort of redness, and I can actually see through it if I hold it right up to my eyes. And then finally the Nut Brown Ale, and that's kind of somewhere in between. It's a deeper kind of brown, reddy brown. It's darker than this, but it's certainly not as opaque as this one here. So great. And then just looking at these as well, I mean, partly maybe to do with the way I poured them, but as far as the heads are concerned, the two darker beers over here from the Samuel Smith seem to be have certainly a bit more of a head on them, and these two, the Fuller's one's much smaller. So okay, London Pride. Let's give you a taste. I'm giving it a smell first, and it's got a kind of sweet aroma coming off it. It's slightly biscuity, I guess. Maybe slightly citrusy, a little bit like orange, maybe. Yeah, it tastes very nice. It's slightly fizzy. It's quite kind of light in the mouth, and it's quite sweet. The first thing that comes up is a sort of sweetness, and I think there is for me is a kind of orangey thing going on there, but then it ends it ends with a certain amount of bitterness. Nothing too extreme or anything, but it's kind of a refreshing bitterness on the aftertaste. That's very nice, yeah. And I think I can see why that's one of the best-selling beers in the country. So let's compare that with the Bengal Lancer then. Same brewery. As we said, it's a bit lighter in look, and it's got quite a different sort of smell on it actually. A bit more of the citrus is hitting me now. There's a bit of it on the London Pride. There's a lot more citrus on the nose on this one. A little bit kind of grapefruit kind of aroma on that. Yeah, and that's quite a lot more bitter than the London Pride. Now that's what you pretty much expect from an IPA. IPAs if they've got one characteristic, it would tend to be that they're more bitter, maybe slightly less malty, slightly less sweet than a regular bitter. So it's definitely got that hallmark, kind of refreshing, grapefruity, hoppy kind of flavour, and particularly on the aftertaste, much more so than the London Pride there. But again, very nice beer. Okay, and then this complete change. Now we've got this opaque, dark, black liquid that's the famous Taddy Porter. So let's give that a taste. Hasn't got nearly such a strong smell actually. A little bit of sweetness. Let's give it a taste. It's actually a lot sweeter on the flavour, and very little of that hoppiness actually. A little bit of bitterness afterwards, but not an awful lot. It's kind of a little bit of coffee kind of flavour there. As far as the actual consistency is concerned and the texture of it, I was slightly surprised actually. It's kind of a bit more fizzy and less creamy than perhaps I was expecting. I think that the closest Guinness, for instance, is ultimately a stout, which is kind of like a variation on porter. And I guess I was expecting this maybe to be a bit creamy and heavy like a Guinness is, but it's not at all. It's kind of probably more of a Coca-Cola texture, if anything, although not in taste. So let's just try that again. Yeah, it's a bit fizzier than the other two here that we've already tried. It's very nice. It's probably kind of, to me, funnily enough, I think it's actually easier to drink. It probably looks a little bit more forbidding, being so dark and unusual, and it's probably less of a, it wouldn't be everyone's first choice if they're not used to drinking beer. But actually, I think this would be a pretty good choice to somebody who doesn't necessarily like beer that much. It's kind of got a chocolatey, coffee-like flavour to it. It's quite sweet and a little bit, but not too much bitterness on it. So, again, very nice beer. And then I'll move on to my final beer today, which is the Nut Brown Ale. Again, Samuel Smith's. And these last two are much more like the kind of beers people used to drink in the 19th century. That the lighter kind of beers came along quite a bit later, and certainly the lagers are a much more recent phenomenon. So, Nut Brown Ale. It's got quite an unusual kind of smell on it. It's a bit like the sort of seashore somehow. I don't know why. Yeah, it's got a sort of like very sort of fresh and sort of seashore kind of seaweedy kind of smell on it, which is a bit of a surprise. Oh yeah, and yeah, it's a nut brown ale. It's quite nutty in flavour as well. It's kind of got a sweet and sour thing going on, which is quite nice. And a definite kind of nutty flavour, probably a bit like almonds, I'd say, really. So, I mean, they're four completely different styles of beer, really. And, I think these two kind of like more, this one in particular is sort of thing I can imagine sitting by the fire, drinking in the winter. It's more of a summer drink, it's more refreshing with the grapefruity hops and that sort of stuff. So as far as scores are concerned, I think my favourite, with a score of 18, would be the Nut Brown Ale here. And then after that, the London Pride with a 17. And then on 16, because they're all nice beers, I think 16 I give the very different Bengal Lancer IPA and the Taddy Porter over here. So that's it for today. Tune in next time.